My oldest son divided the ranch before my wife had even been buried for a month. I found out on a Tuesday morning because a neighbor congratulated me. That was how strange the whole thing began. I had driven into town to buy fence staples after a windstorm knocked down nearly 200 feet of wire along the western pasture. The feed store owner shook my hand. A man from the hardware aisle smiled and wished me luck with the new arrangement. I thanked both of them without understanding a single word. Then my neighbor, Carl Benson, walked over carrying a sack of cattle mineral, Jack. I hear the boys finally worked everything out. I frowned. Worked what out? He looked surprised. The ranch. Everybody says the South Range is going to Ethan and the river pasture belongs to Caleb now. I laughed softly. You must have heard the wrong family. Carl stopped, smiling. No, the survey crew was out there yesterday. I stared at him. Survey crew? Yesterday. I had spent the entire afternoon repairing fences on the north side of the property. No survey crew had spoken to me. No one had knocked on my door. No one had asked permission. Carl shifted uneasily. I thought, well, since your boys were showing people the new boundary markers, the words settled in my chest like cold iron. Boundary markers. Not fence repairs, not grazing plans. Boundary markers. I drove home without stopping anywhere else. Half a mile before reaching the ranch, I saw them. Bright orange stakes, standing across the southern meadow, running in a perfectly straight line through land my grandfather cleared with horses almost 80 years earlier. A white pickup truck sat near the creek. The company logo on the door read High Plains Land Surveying. My two sons stood beside the surveyor studying rolled maps spread across the hood. Neither of them noticed my truck until I stopped behind them. Caleb smiled first. Dad, good, you are here. Perfect timing, not good morning, not how are you. Perfect timing. Ethan rolled up one of the maps. We were just getting the property lines confirmed. I looked toward the orange stakes stretching across the pasture. Confirmed for what? Caleb answered. So everything will be clear when the paperwork goes through. Paperwork! Another careful word. I stepped closer to the survey maps. Across the top of the largest sheet appeared a title. Asterisk Whitaker Ranch Division Proposal. Proposal, not discussion, not possibility. Someone had already drawn lines through my ranch, I asked quietly. Who asked you to divide my land? Neither son answered immediately. Instead, Ethan reached into a leather folder. Dad, Mom always wanted us to avoid fighting after you retired. We are just getting ahead of things. Getting ahead. My late wife, Ruth, hated that expression. She always said people used it whenever they wanted tomorrow's permission before today's conversation. I looked at the surveyor. Did I hire you? He removed his hat respectfully. No, sir. Your sons retained our office. I nodded once. Thank you for answering honestly. Then I looked back at Ethan. When exactly did this begin? He hesitated. About 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. Ruth had been gone only 28 days. They had begun dividing the ranch before her funeral flowers had completely faded. I turned toward the old ranch house. The front porch still held Ruth's rocking chair exactly where she left it. Inside the hallway closet hung her denim chore jacket. She had worn it every spring for 34 years. Just before she died, she handed me one small brass key. She smiled and said only one sentence. If anyone starts measuring this ranch before asking you, take this key to the county clerk. Do not open anything first. I had slipped the key into my desk drawer and almost forgotten about it. Now, watching orange survey stakes cut across generations of family land, I finally understood why she never wanted me to forget it. As Ethan rolled the survey map closed, a single document slipped from the folder onto the grass. I bent down and picked it up. Across the top, stamped in blue county ink, were 7 words. Asterisk preliminary parcel approval pending original deed review. Ask original deed, not deeds. Singular. There was only one original deed they still hadn't seen. The paper remained in my hand while the wind moved across the south pasture. Asterisk preliminary parcel approval pending original deed review. I read the title twice, then a third time Ethan reached toward it. Dad, that is only a draft. I folded it once before handing it back. A draft still begins with someone making a decision. The surveyor quietly rolled his maps together. Sir, if this is not the appropriate time, I looked at him. You have done nothing wrong. You were hired. He nodded respectfully. By your sons? That much was already obvious. I turned back toward Ethan. Who prepared these division plans? He answered carefully. The attorney. Which attorney? Miller Land and Estate. I recognized the name. They handled commercial ranch sales throughout 3 counties, never ours. Ruth insisted we keep every family matter with the county clerk and our longtime attorney, Harold Simmons. She said local people remembered promises better than strangers remembered contracts. Caleb stepped closer. "Dad, nothing has been signed. We are only preparing." Preparing, the same word people always used after deciding something before asking permission. I looked across the pasture. The orange stakes divided more than grass. They cut directly through the trail Ruth rode every spring when checking the newborn calves. She refused to fence there. She said cattle understood families better than surveyors ever would. I asked one quiet question. "Did either of you tell the survey company I approved this?" Neither answered immediately. That silence answered enough. The surveyor finally spoke. Our office was informed the property owner wished to avoid future inheritance disputes. I smiled sadly. Then someone forgot to ask the property owner. His expression changed immediately. He looked toward my sons. Neither corrected him. The survey crew quietly packed their equipment. Within minutes, their truck disappeared down the county road. Only the orange stakes remained, like bright warnings planted in my wife's pasture. I walked slowly back toward the ranch house. Neither son followed. Inside, Ruth's rocking chair still faced the front window. The afternoon sunlight rested across the worn wooden arms exactly as it had every evening for years. I opened my desk drawer. The small brass key still lay inside the blue velvet pouch where Ruth left it. Attached to the key was a faded leather tag. County Archive, Drawer 7. Nothing else. No explanation. Just instructions. An hour later I drove into town. The county courthouse looked exactly the same as when my father first brought me there to record the deed after returning from the war. County Clerk Martha Ellis looked up the moment I entered. "Jack, I wondered when Ruth's key might finally arrive." I stopped walking. "You were expecting this?" She nodded gently. "Not today. Eventually. Your wife left very clear instructions." She unlocked a cabinet behind her desk. Instead of opening it, she looked at me carefully. "Has someone started measuring the ranch?" I answered. "Yesterday." Her expression never changed. "Then it is time." She led me through a hallway I had never noticed before. At the end stood an old fireproof archive room. Metal shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Large leather books filled every wall. She stopped beside one cabinet marked simply set, Drawer 7. The brass key fit perfectly. Inside rested one long cedar box. Across the lid, Ruth had written only 6 words. Asterisk open after they divide the ranch. I carried it to the archive table. Martha remained respectfully silent. Inside the cedar box rested 3 things. 1 sealed letter, 1 rolled county survey, 1 yellow deed tied with blue ribbon. The deed looked far older than anything else. The paper itself had darkened with age. Across the top I could still read the recording date, asterisk August 14, 1948. My grandfather's original ranch deed. I frowned. I already had a copy at home. Martha smiled softly. "No, you have a copy of the recorded deed. That?" She pointed toward the blue ribbon. "Is the original deed your grandfather handed to the county himself." Before I could ask why Ruth had hidden it here, Martha handed me the sealed letter. Across the front, in Ruth's familiar handwriting, were 7 simple words. Asterisk, read this before looking at the deed. Asterisk, I held Ruth's letter for nearly a minute before breaking the seal. The original deed remained tied with blue ribbon beside it. Martha Ellis quietly stepped toward the far end of the archive room. She understood what Ruth had always understood. Some conversations belong only to the person reading them. I unfolded the letter. The paper smelled faintly of cedar, exactly like the blanket chest Ruth kept at the foot of our bed. "Jack, if this letter has reached you, then someone has already started dividing the ranch before asking whether it should ever be divided. Please do not become angry. Become curious. Curiosity uncovers truth. Anger usually hides it." I smiled despite everything. That was Ruth. She believed questions solved more problems than accusations. The letter continued. "There is nothing wrong with our sons wanting certainty. The danger begins when certainty arrives before understanding. That is why I left one deed where no one expected to find it." I looked toward the blue ribbon. "One deed, not another deed, the original," Ruth wrote on. "Please remember something very carefully. Your grandfather signed 2 documents on the same day. Only one was recorded. The other stayed with the original deed." I frowned. 2 documents. My grandfather had never mentioned another one. Martha quietly walked back toward the table. "May I show you something?" She untied the blue ribbon without disturbing the deed itself. Behind the folded parchment rested another sheet, smaller, thicker. Almost hidden against the back cover, my breath caught. It was not another deed. It was an attachment, handwritten, witnessed, county certified, recording instructions intentionally withheld. Across the top appeared one title, Declaration of Unified Ranch Stewardship. I looked at Martha. I have never seen this, she nodded. Almost no one has. Your grandfather specifically instructed the county not to record it unless the original deed was ever physically presented by the family. He believed copies were enough until someone forgot why the ranch existed. I carefully unfolded the declaration. Every sentence had been written in my grandfather's careful hand. The Whitaker Ranch shall never be divided merely for convenience. If one generation wishes to divide ownership, they must first demonstrate that division protects the land better than unity. Otherwise, stewardship remains whole even if management changes. I read the paragraph twice, then a third time. This was not a legal restriction. It was a recorded declaration attached to the original title package. A statement of intent, Martha quietly explained. Modern courts rarely enforce these as binding property restrictions, but county land commissions must consider them whenever voluntary parcel divisions involve historic agricultural holdings. I looked up. Meaning the commission cannot simply ignore your grandfather's recorded intent, especially when the original document has been preserved exactly as instructed. The orange survey stake suddenly seemed much less permanent. I continued reading. Near the bottom another paragraph appeared. Should disagreement arise among my descendants, the county clerk shall first read this declaration aloud before any preliminary division hearing begins. I smiled slowly. My grandfather had trusted county clerks almost as much as he trusted fences. The final sentence carried his signature. Then 3 witnesses. One of them surprised me. Samuel Whitaker, my father, only 22 years old. Martha gently turned the page over. There was one final attachment, added decades later, different ink, different handwriting. Ruth's with county certification dated only 8 months earlier. I stared at it. She had amended my grandfather's declaration, not by changing it, by adding one recorded family statement beneath it. Jack. If our sons ever bring survey maps before bringing family conversation, please ask the county clerk to read your grandfather's declaration exactly as he wrote it. Then ask them one question. Who first suggested dividing the ranch? Because it was not either of our boys. The words struck me harder than anything else in the letter. Not either of our boys. Ruth believed someone else planted the idea. Martha slowly reached into another archive drawer. Jack, there is one more record your wife instructed me to keep sealed until after you finished reading. She placed a slim county visitor log beside the declaration, open to a single page. 6 weeks earlier, the same week Ethan hired the survey company. Visitor, Ethan Whitaker. Purpose, requested copy of parcel history. Visitor immediately before him, Miller Land and Estate. Attorney representative, visitor immediately before that, High Plains Land Surveying. 3 separate visits, less than 20 minutes apart. Not a coincidence, a plan. Then my eyes reached the final name recorded that morning. The first visitor of the day. I recognized it immediately. Douglas Mercer, chairman, * Mercer Ranch Holdings, * the largest neighboring ranch owner in 3 counties, and the same man who had spent 15 years trying to buy our southern pasture. The county visitor log remained open on the archive table. I read the names again. Douglas Mercer, High Plains Land Surveying, Miller Land and Estate. Then my son, Ethan Whitaker, one after another. Within 20 minutes, Martha Ellis quietly folded her hands. Jack, I have worked in this courthouse for 31 years. People rarely arrive in that kind of order by accident. I nodded. Neither did Ruth believe in accidents. She believed in patterns. I asked one question. What parcel history did Ethan request? Martha walked to another cabinet and returned with a thin county file. Every document request remained attached. She slid the request form toward me. Requested records, South Range River Pasture, West Access Road, only the southern portions of the ranch. Not the entire property. I frowned. Why only these? Martha answered before I could finish. Because those 3 parcels touch Mercer Ranch. My stomach tightened. Douglas Mercer had never wanted the whole ranch, only the southern section. For 15 years he made the same offer every spring. Sell me the south pasture. Every year I refused. Ruth once joked that Douglas loved our grass more than his own cattle. At the time we laughed. Now the joke no longer felt funny. Martha reached beneath the visitor log. There is another record. Your wife specifically asked me not to show this unless Mercer ever appeared before your sons. She handed me a certified copy of an old county meeting. Board of Commissioners, 7 years earlier, agenda item, Mercer Ranch Holdings, application for Southern Access Corridor. Denied. Reason: Whitaker Ranch declined permanent easement. I remembered that meeting. Douglas wanted a road through our southern pasture. He claimed it would help neighboring ranches reach the highway. Ruth studied the maps for hours afterward. She finally smiled. Jack, he doesn't want a road. He wants the ranch divided. Only now did I understand. If the ranch remained one property, Douglas could never obtain the access corridor he needed. But if my sons voluntarily divided the land, negotiations became much easier. Smaller parcels, different owners, different conversations. Ruth had seen the strategy years before I had. Martha quietly opened another folder. Your wife left one final county instruction. Not a legal filing, just a sealed note. Across the front, Ruth had written, "Only after Jack learns Mercer's name." I carefully unfolded it. Jack. Douglas will never begin by asking for the ranch. He will begin by helping someone imagine life after the ranch. That is how land is usually lost. Not through force. Through preparation. Please remember, someone who wants your neighbor's fence removed rarely asks the neighbor first. They ask the children. I lowered the letter slowly. Every conversation Ethan described suddenly fit together. Retirement, simplifying ownership, preparing paperwork. No one began with selling. Selling came later. Only after division. Martha nodded gently. Your wife visited me the same afternoon she left this note. She asked one unusual question. I smiled. What was it? She asked. If someone wants the original deed more than the land itself, what are they really buying? I looked toward the deed tied with the blue ribbon. I still did not know. Martha reached for the original parchment, then carefully turned it over. The reverse side carried another county certification, different from every other page. Attached beneath the recording seal was a hand-drawn survey, not of the ranch, of the creek, the southern creek, exactly where Douglas wanted his access road. Martha pointed toward a narrow strip shaded in blue. Do you recognize this? I leaned closer. Then my heart skipped. The spring, the natural spring my grandfather always refused to sell. Martha nodded. Most people think Mercer wants pasture. He doesn't. He wants the water rights. The original deed includes something modern copies no longer display, because the county stopped reproducing attached survey sketches decades ago. Only the original retained them. I stared at the faded ink. The spring produced water year-round, even during drought. Every neighboring ranch depended on wells. Only ours possessed a natural source that never failed. If Douglas controlled the southern pasture, he controlled the spring. And if he controlled the spring, he controlled every future development across the valley. Before either of us spoke again, the courthouse hallway echoed with hurried footsteps. A deputy clerk appeared in the archive doorway. Martha, the County Land Commission just called. They've scheduled an emergency parcel review hearing. Tomorrow morning. Whitaker Ranch Division. Requested by Miller Land and Estate. Martha looked at me, then slowly smiled. Good. Your grandfather specifically requested that if this day ever came, the original deed be read into the county record before anyone else spoke. The county courthouse looked busier than I had ever seen it. Pickup trucks filled both sides of Main Street before 8 o'clock. Neighbors stood in small groups outside the entrance. Word traveled quickly in ranch country, especially when someone whispered that the Whitaker Ranch might finally be divided. I parked beside the old livestock auction building. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, Carl Benson walked over. Jack. I heard the hearing was moved up. I nodded. Apparently someone wanted answers quickly. Carl smiled sadly. Fast answers usually belong to people who already know the questions. That sounded exactly like something Ruth would have said. Inside the courthouse, the County Land Commission had already gathered. 3 commissioners, the county surveyor, representatives from Miller Land and Estate. Douglas Mercer sat quietly near the back, wearing the same calm expression I had seen for years whenever another neighbor sold him a few more acres. My sons sat together at the front table. Neither looked comfortable, neither smiled. Chairwoman Helen Ortiz called the meeting to order. The first agenda item: Application for voluntary division of Whitaker Ranch. Submitted through Miller Land and Estate. She looked toward Ethan. Is the property owner present? Before he could answer, I stood. I am. Every head in the room turned. Ethan slowly lowered his eyes. Attorney Daniel Miller rose immediately. Mr. Whitaker. Wonderful. Perhaps we can resolve today's paperwork together. Paperwork again. Always paperwork, never family. Never history, only signatures. Martha Ellis quietly entered through the side door carrying a long cedar box. The same cedar box Ruth had hidden inside door 7. Every commissioner recognized it immediately. Chairwoman Ortiz smiled. Original title archive. That certainly changes today's order of business. Daniel Miller frowned. Madam Chair, I do not believe, she interrupted him politely. County policy is quite clear. Whenever an original historic agricultural deed is formally presented during a parcel division hearing, the original record must be reviewed before any application proceeds. Martha placed the cedar box carefully on the commissioner's table. Then she untied the familiar blue ribbon. The original 1948 deed rested beneath the courtroom lights. Daniel Miller shifted uneasily. Douglas Mercer stopped smiling. Chairwoman Ortiz carefully unfolded the attached Declaration of Unified Ranch Stewardship. She read every word aloud. No one interrupted, no one whispered. Even the room itself seemed quieter. Then she reached Ruth's recorded family statement. If our sons ever bring survey maps before bringing family conversation, please ask the county clerk to read your grandfather's declaration exactly as he wrote it. Then ask them one question. Who first suggested dividing the ranch? Silence settled over the chamber. Chairwoman Ortiz looked toward Ethan. That seems like a fair question. Who first suggested dividing the ranch? Ethan stared at the table. For several long moments he said nothing. Finally, Douglas Mercer invited me to lunch nearly 2 months ago. The room remained completely still. Daniel Miller slowly turned toward Mercer. Mercer kept his expression calm. Ethan continued. He said Dad deserved to retire. He said dividing ownership early would keep peace in the family. He said, he hesitated. Chairwoman Ortiz waited patiently. He said the county preferred dealing with smaller parcels. Martha Ellis quietly spoke for the first time. That statement is false. Every commissioner nodded. Douglas finally stood. With respect, I merely offered general advice. I answered before anyone else could. No, you offered my sons tomorrow before asking me about today. The room fell silent again. Chairwoman Ortiz reached for another document, the original deed attachment, the spring survey. She studied it carefully, then looked toward the county surveyor. Is this original attachment still recognized within the historic title record? The surveyor adjusted his glasses. Absolutely. It identifies the protected natural spring and the associated historical agricultural water rights. Protected water rights. Daniel Miller's expression changed immediately. He had never seen the original attachment before. Neither had Douglas Mercer, the county surveyor continued. Any parcel division affecting this spring requires an entirely separate state water review. Estimated processing time, he consulted another page. Approximately 3 to 5 years. Douglas looked genuinely surprised. 3 to 5. The surveyor nodded. Minimum. Potentially longer. Every eye in the room turned toward Mercer. For the first time all morning, he looked unprepared. Then Martha quietly placed one final folded paper beside the original deed. Jack. Ruth instructed me to reveal this only after the water survey became part of the record. I unfolded it carefully. It was not another letter. It was a county receipt, filed only 9 months before Ruth passed away. Title Notice of Historic Water Source Preservation. Recorded by Ruth Whitaker. Chairwoman Ortiz read the final paragraph aloud. The Whitaker Spring shall remain dedicated to agricultural use for neighboring family ranches during declared drought conditions. Douglas slowly sat back in his chair. He finally understood. Even if the ranch were divided, even if someone someday purchased the southern pasture, Ruth had already protected the spring for every neighboring family. No future owner could control it for private development. The room remained perfectly quiet. Then Chairwoman Ortiz looked toward Daniel Miller. Counselor, would your client still like to proceed with today's parcel division request? Daniel looked at Ethan, then at Caleb, finally at Douglas Mercer. No one answered. No one answered Chairwoman Ortiz's question. Not Ethan, not Caleb, not Attorney Daniel Miller, not even Douglas Mercer. The silence stretched across the hearing room until Chairwoman Helen Ortiz quietly folded the application for the Whitaker Ranch Division and laid it on the table. Very well. Since no applicant wishes to continue, this hearing would normally conclude here. Normally, that single word caught my attention. She looked toward Martha Ellis, County Clerk. You indicated there was one additional historical record connected to the original deed. Martha nodded. Yes, Madam Chair. Ruth Whitaker instructed me to present it only if today's hearing reached this point. She opened the cedar box one final time. Beneath the deed, beneath the declaration, beneath Ruth's letter, lay one thin county envelope sealed with dark green wax. Across the front, my wife's handwriting remained perfectly clear. Asterisk only after the division stops. Martha handed it to me. Jack, your wife wanted you to open this yourself. I carefully broke the seal. Inside rested a single handwritten letter. Jack, if you are reading this, then your grandfather's deed has already done exactly what he hoped. It slowed everyone down long enough for the truth to arrive. Please remember, the ranch was never our greatest inheritance. Trust was. I smiled quietly. Even now, Ruth was teaching instead of accusing. The next paragraph surprised everyone. Our boys never planned to hurt you. Someone simply convinced them that planning ahead was wiser than talking first. Forgive that mistake. But do not ignore it, because families lose much more through silence than they ever lose through disagreement. I folded the page for a moment. Ethan quietly wiped his eyes. Caleb stared at the floor. Neither defended himself. Neither blamed anyone else. Ruth continued. There is one last county record inside this envelope. Please ask the chairwoman to read it aloud. I looked inside. A folded certified document rested behind the letter. Chairwoman Ortiz accepted it. Her expression changed the moment she saw the county seal. This was recorded only 6 months ago. She unfolded the page carefully. The title read, Right of First Family Stewardship. Daniel Miller leaned forward. I have never seen one of these. The chairwoman nodded. Very few counties still use them. She continued reading. Before any portion of Whitaker Ranch may ever be voluntarily transferred outside the Whitaker family, every direct descendant must first receive written opportunity to assume stewardship under identical terms. No outside purchaser may negotiate before that family conference occurs. Douglas Mercer quietly closed his briefcase. He already understood. Every strategy he had spent years building depended on speaking to individual family members separately. Ruth had legally required exactly the opposite. The family had to gather first. Only then could outsiders enter the conversation. Chairwoman Ortiz smiled faintly. Mrs. Whitaker was remarkably thorough. The county surveyor laughed softly. She protected the deed, the water, and now, the conversation itself. The commissioners voted only minutes later. Application for voluntary parcel division withdrawn, unanimously. The wooden gavel struck once. The hearing ended. Neighbors slowly began leaving the courtroom. Several stopped to shake my hand. Carl Benson smiled. Jack, your wife just taught this whole county something, I answered. She usually did. Outside the courthouse, Ethan caught up with me before I reached my truck. Dad, please don't say anything yet. Just listen. I waited. He took a long breath. Douglas never promised me money. He promised certainty. He kept saying everything would become easier if ownership became simpler. I believed him. I stopped asking whether easier for me meant harder for you. I placed one hand on his shoulder. That is exactly the question your mother hoped you would eventually ask. Caleb joined us. Neither brother looked toward the ranch. Instead, they looked toward me. Dad, can we pull every one of those orange survey stakes out this afternoon? I smiled for the first time in days. No, they looked confused. Tomorrow morning. 6 o'clock. Why wait? Because your grandfather cleared that pasture at sunrise. Your mother checked those fences at sunrise. If we're going to put the land back together, we'll begin the same way they always did, together. As we walked toward the parking lot, Martha Ellis stepped outside carrying the now empty cedar box. Jack, one last thing. She handed me a small brass tag that had been tied beneath the blue ribbon. I had never noticed it before. Across the worn metal were 6 simple words engraved by my grandfather decades earlier. Asterisk, land can be divided. Families cannot. Asterisk, the next morning. The sun had not yet reached the eastern ridge when I walked toward the south pasture. The air still carried the cool smell of dew. Exactly the kind of morning Ruth loved most. She used to say the land spoke honestly before breakfast because no one had started arguing with it yet. At precisely 6 o'clock, 2 pickup trucks rolled into the yard. Ethan climbed out of the first. Caleb stepped from the second. Neither carried folders, neither carried survey maps. Each held only a pair of leather work gloves. Good. I handed Ethan a post puller. I gave Caleb a shovel. No speeches, no lecture. Only work. The first orange survey stake came out easily. The second fought us. The third snapped halfway down and forced all 3 of us to dig together before it finally came loose. Nobody complained. For nearly an hour we moved slowly across the pasture, removing every bright marker that had divided the ranch only 2 days earlier. By the time the last stake disappeared into the truck bed, the meadow looked exactly as it had the week before. Only the faint holes remained. I looked toward my sons. Land heals quickly. People sometimes take longer. Both nodded quietly. As we started back toward the ranch house, another pickup appeared on the county road. County Clerk Martha Ellis stepped out carrying a long cardboard mailing tube. Jack, I almost forgot. Your grandfather left one final archive item with the original deed. The commission returned it this morning. I frowned. Another document. She smiled. Not exactly. Inside the tube rested an old linen survey map, much older than the modern maps High Plains Surveying had used. Across the top, hand-lettered in fading black ink, were the words, Whitaker Ranch Stewardship Survey. Not Property Survey. Stewardship Survey. I unrolled it across the hood of my truck. Instead of parcel lines, the map showed something entirely different. The spring, the pear orchard, the calving meadow, the old seed barn, the family cemetery. Every place carried handwritten notes. Not measurements, memories. Grandfather taught Jack to mend fence here. Ruth planted cottonwoods after the drought. Children learned horseback riding beside this creek. Caleb laughed softly. This isn't a survey. I smiled. No, it's a family history pretending to be one. Martha nodded. Your grandfather filed it with the county because he believed future surveyors should know what maps cannot measure. Near the bottom corner, another folded page had been attached. Different handwriting. Ruth's added only months before her passing. Jack, if the boys are standing beside you while reading this, then the ranch survived another generation. Please ask them one favor. Not for me, for themselves. I looked toward Ethan. Read it aloud. He unfolded the page. His voice caught slightly as he began, If you ever inherit responsibility for this ranch, walk every fence before reading every contract. Listen to every neighbor before every consultant. And remember that no survey stake has ever loved this land. Silence settled over the pasture. Only the wind moved through the grass. Then Caleb quietly folded the page. Dad, Mom knew exactly what we needed to hear, I answered softly. She usually did. Just then another truck approached. Not Mercer Ranch. Not Miller Land and Estate. A white county vehicle. The county surveyor climbed out carrying a clipboard. Morning, Jack. Morning, boys. I thought you should know before rumors started. I waited. Every preliminary parcel record filed for the Whitaker Ranch has officially been withdrawn. He smiled. There is no active division application anywhere in county records anymore. Ethan looked relieved. Thank you. The surveyor nodded. Actually, thank your grandfather. I've worked 30 years in this office. I've never seen an original deed stop a ranch from being divided before the lawyers could start arguing. He climbed back into his truck, then paused. One more thing. Yesterday afternoon, Douglas Mercer submitted a request to purchase another neighboring ranch. Not yours, apparently. He finally realized yours was never for sale. As the county truck disappeared down the road, I rolled up my grandfather's stewardship map. For the first time since Ruth passed away, the ranch no longer felt like something waiting to be divided. It felt exactly what she always believed it was. A place where every generation borrowed the land, long enough to teach the next one how not to lose it. The rolled stewardship map rested on my kitchen table for 3 days before I opened it again. Not because I had forgotten it, because some things deserve to be read slowly. Ruth believed important papers should never be hurried. She used to leave birthday cards unopened until after supper because she wanted the day to become quiet enough to appreciate them. I finally spread the linen map across the old oak table where she once planned every calving season. Ethan arrived carrying a toolbox. Caleb followed with fresh cinnamon rolls from the bakery in town. Neither one mentioned surveys. Neither one mentioned lawyers. Instead, Ethan asked the question I had been waiting to hear. Dad, what needs fixing today? I smiled. The east gate. It has been sagging for nearly a year. Good. He nodded as though repairing a gate mattered more than discussing inheritance. Perhaps today it did. Before we walked outside, I pointed toward the stewardship map. Your grandfather left one more lesson. Read the note in the corner. Caleb unfolded the small flap I had overlooked. My grandfather's handwriting filled only half a page. Whoever owns this ranch last will never truly own it. The land belonged to God before us. It will belong to another family after us. Our job is simply to leave it stronger than we found it. Caleb slowly folded the page. Grandpa always made everything sound simple. I laughed quietly, because he spent 50 years learning which things actually were. The east gate took most of the morning. The hinges needed replacing. One cedar post had begun leaning after heavy spring rains. We worked together without rushing, without arguing. Exactly the way Ruth always preferred. Around noon, another truck entered the driveway. County Clerk Martha Ellis climbed out carrying a small wooden crate. "Jack, the Archives Committee asked me to return something." I frowned. "I thought everything already came back." She smiled. "So did I. Until we cleaned the old storage shelves yesterday." She lifted the lid. Inside rested dozens of black and white photographs. Old county survey photographs. Fence lines, barns, creeks. Then one picture immediately caught my attention. It showed my grandfather standing beside the original ranch entrance. Behind him hung a wooden sign I had never seen before. Martha turned the photograph over. The county surveyor wrote notes on the back. Entrance marker, removed during road widening, stored temporarily. No further record. I looked up. The sign disappeared, apparently. Martha reached deeper into the crate. Not quite. Beneath the photographs rested a weathered oak board, nearly 4 feet long. The paint had faded almost completely, but one sentence remained readable. Asterisk stewardship is measured by what you leave behind. My throat tightened. I remembered it. The sign stood beside the ranch gate when I was a little boy. After the highway department widened the county road, I never saw it again. I assumed it had been destroyed. Instead, someone quietly saved it. Martha smiled. Your grandfather asked the county to keep it until someone remembered to ask where it went. Looks like today finally arrived. Ethan carefully lifted the old sign. Dad, can we hang this back at the entrance? I looked toward the ranch road, toward the place where visitors first entered our land. Then I nodded. Yes, but not because it belonged there, because we finally do. That evening all three of us installed the sign beside the front gate. Neighbors slowed their trucks as they passed. Some waved, some smiled. Nobody needed an explanation. The words explained themselves. Just before sunset, Ethan stood quietly beside me. Dad, I never asked you something. I waited. If Mom had never left those letters, would you still have forgiven us? I looked across the pasture where the orange survey stakes had once stood. Probably. He looked surprised. Really? I nodded. Forgiveness was never the difficult part. Trust is rebuilt one sunrise at a time, not one apology at a time. He smiled. Then I guess we'd better keep getting up early. I laughed. Your mother would approve of that answer. As darkness settled across the ranch, the old wooden sign caught the last light of the day. It had disappeared from the county road for nearly 40 years now. It had finally come home. The old wooden sign stood beside the ranch entrance through the rest of the summer. Every neighbor who passed slowed down. Some rolled down their windows. Others simply tipped their hats. No one asked why the sign had returned. They already knew. Good things eventually find their way home. The ranch settled back into its ordinary rhythm. Calving season, fence repairs, hay cutting. The kind of work that leaves a man tired enough to sleep without worrying about tomorrow. Ethan arrived before sunrise nearly every morning. Not because I asked him to, because he chose to. Caleb stopped bringing maps. He brought coffee, work gloves, replacement hinges. Small things that quietly said what apologies sometimes cannot. One Saturday, County Clerk Martha Ellis visited with a single envelope. No cedar box, no blue ribbon, no hidden surprise. Just one official county notice. Jack, I thought you would want this personally. I opened it. The heading read, Whitaker Ranch Division Application. Status, officially closed. Reason, withdrawn by applicants. Below it appeared one additional notation. Asterisk historic original deed reviewed. No further action required. I smiled. The county records finally matched the truth. Martha laughed softly. Your grandfather would have enjoyed seeing that sentence. I answered. Ruth would have framed it. She probably would have. Later that afternoon, the entire family gathered beneath the cottonwoods near the spring. Not for a legal meeting. Not for another hearing. For a picnic. Grandchildren chased one another across the same meadow where orange survey stakes had stood only months earlier. The spring flowed quietly through the grass, exactly as it always had. Sarah Jenkins arrived with several local school children. The agricultural history program Ruth had quietly protected was beginning its first season. The children carried notebooks instead of fishing poles, questions instead of opinions. I watched them gather around the spring. Sarah smiled. Mrs. Whitaker wanted children to know where clean water begins. She said people protect what they understand. I nodded. That sounded exactly like Ruth. Ethan stood beside me. Dad, may I ask you something? Of course. If Grandpa's original deed had never been found, do you think the ranch would still be together today? I looked across the fields, then toward the children studying the spring. Finally I answered, maybe, maybe not. The deed stopped the paperwork. Your mother's letters changed the people. The difference matters. He smiled quietly. I think I finally understand. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I walked alone to the old family cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch. Ruth rested beside my parents. My grandparents rested a few yards away. I carried only one thing with me, the brass tag my grandfather had hidden beneath the blue ribbon. Asterisk, land can be divided, families cannot. I placed it gently beside Ruth's headstone for a moment, then slipped it back into my pocket. It belonged with the living now, not the dead. As I walked back toward the ranch house, the lights from the porch reached across the yard. Ruth always left that light on whenever one of the boys stayed out repairing fences after dark. She said home should never make people wonder whether they were still welcome. The porch light still glowed. So did the old rocking chair. Neither had moved since she left. Inside, I opened the hallway cabinet. The original deed returned to its cedar box. My grandfather's stewardship map rested beside it. Ruth's letters lay on top, not hidden anymore, simply waiting. For the day another generation might need reminding that inheritance begins long before a lawyer opens a file. It begins the first time a family chooses conversation over convenience, stewardship over ownership, and love over land. I switched off the kitchen light and looked one last time through the window toward the ranch. The fences stood straight. The spring still flowed. The orange survey stakes were gone. Only the grass remained. Exactly the way my grandfather first walked it. Exactly the way Ruth always hoped it would stay.